Hi, I'm David Hackhoff, Executive Director of NewFest, and I am very thrilled to welcome you to this conversation today. It's one I'm really looking forward to on LGBTQ gathering spaces in the time of COVID. This is something that has been on our minds a lot as we have been planning this festival, and something that has really affected our community. So we have an incredible panel to discuss this topic. This is one of many virtual conversations that we have going on during the festival. We also have conversations on LGBTQ global advocacy, on queer journalism, on centering Black, trans, and queer voices in film, and several others. So please check newfest.org for a full list of all of our virtual conversations at our website, newfest.org. You can also see the 120 films that we have available to stream on demand throughout the country as part of this year's festival. It's a really amazing lineup, so I encourage you to dive in and watch some really great queer stories. So as I mentioned, virtual, in person, how are LGBTQ communities gathering in the time of COVID? How has the pandemic affected them? We at NewFest recorded introductions to all of our films in front of LGBTQ historic sites in order to tip our hat to the queer legacy of New York and also shine a spotlight on landmarks and community organizations and queer gathering spaces that have been impacted by the pandemic. And I'm really excited to hear how this lineup, all three of these folks are dear friends of NewFest, partners to NewFest, and we have an incredible moderator from the Atlantic who has done some really great reporting on this topic. Please welcome Spencer Kornhaber.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. I'm glad we could all be here today for this virtual gathering, though I definitely wish it was in person. And that's something we're going to be talking about today. Obviously, coronavirus has been a challenge for all segments of society, but something I've worried about and done reporting about from the beginning is just the idea that it's been hitting queer folks in a different way than the rest of society. And that's for a lot of reasons, but I think you can boil it down to the idea that the queer movement has always tried to fight against isolation in many different ways. And so we have a great panel today that is tackling that problem in a lot of different ways. We have Glennda Testone from the LGBT Community Center in New York City, where she's executive director. Andria Wilson, the executive director at Toronto's Inside Out, which is Canada's largest LGBTQ film festival. And Eric Vaughan, manager of LGBTQ programs at the New York City Department of Education. Thanks for joining me. I wanted to start by getting a little personal history, and I wondered if we could just go around and talk about the first queer gathering space that's made a difference in your own lives, and what difference that was, what was the significance of it, what did it mean to find queer gathering in a physical space. Let's start with Glennda.
Thank you so much, Spencer. Really excited to be here with Andria and Eric and having this conversation about gathering spaces for our community. I think probably my first queer gathering space that I can remember and really relate to was Ginger's in Park Slope, Brooklyn. If you're familiar, it's a pretty famous, is that the right word? It's a pretty popular lesbian bar.
Legendary.
And I had just graduated with a master's degree in women's studies from Ohio State, and I was a very strong social justice advocate, and I consider myself an LGBTQ ally. I was not at that moment aware that I was also a member of the community. So I went to Ginger's, the people I worked with at GLAAD at the time, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, said, well, here we're going to take you to this lesbian bar and you can see what it's like. And I remember oh, this is so cool. I love it. And this is very similar to a bar I would have gone to in Ohio with my women's studies crew. And then a couple of years later, when I realized I was gay and had my first girlfriend, I can remember going there on New Year's or something and being oh, this is our spot. This is my home. We can go to our bar. with our folks and hang out. And it just felt really great. So shout out to Gingers.
How about you, Eric?
Very similar story as Glennda's. I remember maybe an equally famous gay bar, Pieces, and I was super young, probably fresh out of high school, and one of my coworkers was bartending there and told me they can get me in, and they obviously saw something in me that I didn't see because I was not out at all at the time. So I was like, okay, it's like went down to the Village, and I'm like, all right, like not even realizing that it was going to be a gay bar. And then, of course, as soon as I like walked up, they had the pictures on the front. I'm like, oh, okay. I realized immediately where I was, and it has been home ever since. And it's the bar that I like take my dad to. It's like when I have friends come to New York, I always take them there, no matter what's going on. They have like a Christmas in July celebration that I try to hit up every July. It's like me and my partner's favorite place to go, and it definitely feels like home every time I go back.
How about you, Andria?
I love that. I definitely grew up in sort of like drag culture, that scene. I wasn't really around a lot of queer women for most of my youth until I found this amazing bar. It was called the Company House. And it was, I was like an art school, theater school kid. And this space was like that hybrid, like music venue, performance art space, like weird burlesque, cool, like all of that sort of intersection. And it was like this very powerful and integral space for like developing work and building relationships and getting up on stage and trying things out. So that was super formative for me because it was, a space where like queer identity, trans identity, and this like exploration of like arts and culture and all of that work sort of came together really beautifully in a way that was very, very organic and just authentic, and could have only happened, I think, in that moment and that space and time. And of course, it no longer exists, but the impact was so significant.
Yeah. I feel like you all are trying to create spaces like that in your own way. Glennda, how have you tried to kind of keep that ability, like that feeling of a gathering space alive during the pandemic at the center?
It's a really great question. And it strikes me also that, one of the reasons I was struck by two things. One, that we all named bars, that were our first gathering places, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it just strikes me that one of the reasons the center and LGBT centers exist across the country is sort of to create an LGBT gathering space that is an alternative to a bar for those in our community that may be struggling with addiction, or just to give different options. But I certainly found personally, like, the bar scene was kind of the dominant queer scene to plug into. And then when I really moved to Brooklyn and discovered the center, it provided an alternative space to gather with people and connect. And so I was also struck, Spencer, by what you said about this time and our community combating isolation. And when the center was founded in 1983, we were founded for exactly that reason. We were really trying to combat isolation for individuals in our community, create a home where people could come together and activate and mourn and celebrate and do all of those amazing things. And so when the pandemic hit and we were literally talking about social isolation policy to try and protect the population from this virus, we at the center very quickly felt like this is going to be bad for our community, and we need to figure out a way to make sure people feel connected, supported, they have the resources they need, that they are not winding up in New York alone in their apartments with no one. And so We pivoted very quickly. Like, we closed the building on a Friday. We're a very place-based organization. I mean, people literally physically gather in the center 365 days a year, barring natural disasters, in different configurations for different reasons, different conversations, different support groups, different performances, activities. So to have that sort of close because of the pandemic, we knew we wanted to create as vibrant and connected a community online as possible. And so we shifted immediately, like our existing community members that we were in counseling with, youth members that are part of our youth program, people that were in specific support groups that were meeting in person. We shifted all of that online, and we're really up and running mostly that Monday, but the rest by the end of that week. And that allowed a place for people to bring their questions and fears and anxiety. And we found over the course of the pandemic that we actually, when it comes to mental health services and substance abuse services, which we provide, we have seen a real increase in demand digitally. So we've had anywhere between 25% or 40% increase depending on the specific service. So we clearly see there's a need, and we are being as creative and fabulous as we possibly can be to make sure we're connecting with people in the ways that they need to be connected with, either online or on the phone, or, I have examples of that, but that's sort of our focus right now.
Yeah, that strikes me as sort of, it's probably similar or an extension of what you've been working on, Eric, in New York City schools. I mean, the idea of like having a queer space in schools is foreign to me. I grew up with it. How were you doing that before, and how has that translated after the pandemic?
Yeah, so that's been a huge goal of mine upon me entering into this role over a year ago now. And I wanted to create these safe spaces for students who identified as part of the LGBTQ community. And just knowing that I was a former NYC school student and did not have those safe spaces and not have that GSA club, I wanted to make sure that our students were feeling welcome and feeling affirmed in schools. So we launched this big mission last year to increase GSA clubs, increase events, have a lot of in-person representation as much as possible. And then COVID hit. So the students that we were so desperately trying to connect and trying to provide these resources to, who weren't being affirmed at home, we then had to shift immediately and really quickly and figure out a way to make sure that they were still feeling just as safe, if not more so, because we know a lot of our students aren't in households where they're being affirmed or they're being supported by their families. So we immediately began working with different offices and different school staffs and guidance counselors to make sure that we had resources and we had plans of actions in place for students. We moved all of our programming. Instead of like canceling, we just decided to like shift it to online virtual spaces. We renamed things and kind of have like these like hidden names and hidden clubs, so like students can still go into these spaces while their parents may be in another room and still feel safe. Wow. Because the big mission is like, how can we wanted to reach the most vulnerable students possible, and the way to do that and to keep them safe was extremely a high priority. So we changed some names around of clubs. GSA clubs got renamed in many different cases to like diversity clubs or different things, so we can still support those students and they still knew that they had support and family around. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, so like code names, that's kind of queer and fun.
Yeah. It's really been cool to see what the students and faculty have like come up with for code names. They're really creative. Anything good?
Or would that be outing them?
That would probably be outing them, but so many things, yeah.
Oh, was that?
No, said there's so many good names though. I'll tell you later.
Andria, this was going to be the 30th year of Inside Out Fest. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So how do you throw a film festival in a pandemic? Penny, here?
You know, I think, yeah, I think there's something, you know, about kind of the intersection of, you know, cultural events and like queer space and queer events that in the pandemic has, you know, the challenges have hit on so many levels. You know, we see what's happening with our venues, with, you know, live performance, music, theater, and film festivals. All of us are using the same kinds of spaces, but then when you add in, you know, the LGBTQ side of this arts presentation, you know, we also work with, you know, spaces, you know, we're here in Toronto, Glennda, like, you know, your center in New York, and so there is, you know, such a deep impact of not being able to be in those spaces for our communities. And that was the first thing that our team really struggled with. Like, we know we're so privileged to work in film and to have in this moment, you know, completed works that can be showcased in a digital format that, you know, it's not compromising the work. It's not a significant pivot, to use the word of 2020. It's, you know, we can build a platform like what NewFest has done, like what we did at Inside Out, and we can share those films with our communities to a degree, but we can't recreate that feeling of moving into those spaces and seeing those works, beside and behind and surrounded by, you know, the people who are in that shared experience with you. So I think that is the area where there's had to be so much innovation. You know, how do we connect? What do those connections really mean? How do we, you know, redefine, you know, our experiences in that way? And also, you know, something that was really paramount for me is how do we support our artists who are also members of our communities through this time? You know, yes, we're going to show their completed works and we're going to pay them a fee for that. But there's so much that they benefit from professionally from being on the film festival circuit, being in that space. So how do we create those opportunities? How do we mentor? How do we truly, you know, provide them with something that is going to allow them to weather all of this? So I think those were the core questions, you know, certainly not unique to our specific festival, but really to the sector that everyone has been processing, you know, over these past months. And you know, I've seen some amazing, incredible innovations that have come about, but I am still missing that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, thinking about a film festival or any kind of like other artistic gathering, like, you know, a gallery night or something like that, schmoozing is like an important part of it, right? Like making these new connections. How have you, Andria, seen, like, how have you all dealt with trying to foster that, and have you seen connections being made or not?
It's, you know, it's a tough one. And I have to say too, for me personally, as like an industry professional, I felt so isolated because the way I connect with my peers is at their events, you know, like it's, you know, being able to be in these spaces together and share in that way. And so I've been an active part of creating like collaborative professional networks for queer folks during this time. So we launched NACFA, which is the North American Queer Festival Alliance, and some other sort of ad hoc groups, just to really be able to have people that you could call and be like, what are you doing about this problem we've never imagined we would have? And you know, kind of working in that way, really leaning into the kind of knowledge base of everyone, bringing everything together. And for the artists, you know, we really doubled down on a strategy of actually more structure. Like, the thing about networking at a professional event, you know, in person at a festival, at a gallery opening, you know, it's those like happenstance meetings, or those, oh, I bumped into this person, you know, waiting online for the bathroom, and, you know, that's great story. But it's very, very difficult to create those kinds of connections in a virtual space without structure. So, you know, we created like, you know, within our feature film financing program, we expanded it to, you know, have more participants. We structured their meetings to a much higher level of detail, increase the amount of meetings. So just trying to like work every possible angle to help artists to like practically move their projects forward through creating those kind of connections. But I think the nut that hasn't been cracked yet for sure is like, how do you create those like virtual meet cutes, you know?
Yeah. Glennda, are you all having any success with that at the center?
We have tried a bunch of different things, and I guess that last question made me think most about. It doesn't quite recreate it, but one of the things we faced that I know a lot of nonprofit and social service, social justice organization, a lot of organizations and companies face is. We really relied pretty heavily on events to do fundraising for us. And so when the pandemic hit, we had our annual dinner that the last 2 years has raised, over $2 million for the organization that was supposed to happen in April. It obviously could not happen. And we also had our bike ride, our annual AIDS ride, which we've been doing for 23 years. That was going to happen, was supposed to happen at the end of September. And we knew pretty early on, like, we're not going to be able to do this in person. So we pushed ourselves to get creative really quickly. And we transformed that event into a 275 challenge. Our AIDS ride is always from Boston to New York. It's 275 miles. So we converted it into an opportunity for people to get creative with that 275 number and, make masks for 275 people, or bake for 275 minutes, or ride your bike for 275 minutes, or basically anything that you wanted to do, and really try and fundraise to support the center and the services we were offering the community. And we did, it was really successful. We had no idea, no benchmark for how this would go or what this would be like. We did it in July. We had over 900 people participate. So it was one of the benefits, I think, of this new online world is that the geography is no longer a barrier. So we had a lot of people who had done the AIDS ride themselves for years, either on the bike or on the crew, who had family members all over the country and some all over the world, who had seen them participate in this and thought, oh, I want to be a part of that. I can do that from wherever I am in the US or in the country. And so that was really exciting. And we did a lot of different creative things to connect throughout the day live on Instagram. We had an opening ceremony that was taped and also live. And then we had a closing ceremony where we brought everybody together. It doesn't quite, nothing exactly matches what it's like in person, but I think that experience for us probably came the closest. We all knew, even if we were like separate doing our thing, okay, there are hundreds of other people out there doing this right now, whatever they're doing, along with me for this one specific cause. And that felt, I think the meaning behind it was really an amazing connection as well.
Were you using like Zoom or like remote video to bring some of the people doing these projects together?
That's a great question. So yes, we were. And then we had on the ride, both in person and this 275 challenge, we had teams. So we had different, like we have Team Eagle is one of our longest standing teams on the ride. And that's for the Eagle Bar in New York City, which is a leather bar. They are amazing and fabulous. So they like put on their leather and they were all like broadcasting to each other. They had like a Facebook live streaming channel. People could tune in, just a ton of different, one of our other teams, Muskrat Nation, is these two amazing guys and their 7, 8 cats. I don't know, lots of cats. They have a huge following on Instagram. And so they got like over 50 of their followers to join them and participate in this activity. And they were communicating with each other. And we did use, I feel like we used every tool available that day to connect people and try and make sure that it felt as close to in person as possible.
Cool. Eric, what is the social environment like for kids right now in remote learning?
Yeah, so now we have like this like blended learning thing that I did not even see coming, and I tried to plan out in my mind what steps towards the DOE was going to take, and did not see this blended learning tool that they pulled out in the ninth inning. But so some students are in classes 2 days, 3 days a week. Some students are fully remote. Whether you're remote or in person, you still have to attend classes 5 days a week, or in some students, I think younger students are doing 4 days a week. So they're definitely missing out on like that social interaction, especially students who are just fully remote. So we're trying the best way possible to still bring that in. But I know a lot of students are like, they're on Zoom from 8 o'clock to 3, and they are wiped out. So even these events that we're trying to host to bring our LGBTQ youth together, it's a bit overwhelming, and they kind of just want to be done with it, and they want to shut down their computer. And for the first time ever, I think parents are seeing kids like want to disconnect from the internet, which is a strange time and a weird thing I would not have predicted to happen in 2020, but it's here. So we're trying to just figuring out ways to make things as fun and as interactive as possible. NewFest has offered a tremendous resource in that, in providing us with a youth night, youth film festivals, so we can actually have kids interact, and they can talk about movies, and they can watch it on their own time. Over the summer, we actually had a movie night where students can just go sign in, watch a movie, and then come back together, talk about it, interact with each other. And it was really, really cool to see how many students were engaged, despite it being over the summer and just them being done with everything. They still need that social piece, right? So they still wanted to really, really connect with each other. So just trying to find more interactive ways that we can bridge students together, whether it's through that or through GSA virtual clubs, we have virtual Stonewall in tours that we're doing with the Parks Department starting this week. So like students can the park rangers will do like a virtual tour for students and like talk to them about the history of Stonewall, and it's like quizzes, and they try to be as interactive as possible to keep the students' interest. Because I know even myself, after like a long day of meetings all day, it's hard to keep my interest. So, but we're doing the best we can as far as the DOE side in my office, and then we work with tremendous partners who have really, really stepped it up and have been providing tremendous resources to our students.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny that we finally found a way for kids to like get unglued to their screens. I mean, I feel like it's happened to me too. Yeah, like Zoom fatigue is something that you hear about a lot. Andria, in the like arts and cinema world, how do people try to get around it, or are there like other ways of connecting outside of the screen that you guys have found that's doable in the pandemic?
Well, we felt extremely lucky to be able to be a part of this drive-in event situation. That really emerged as like the one opportunity for in-person events, not just for cinema, but for live concerts, for drag, for so many different elements. Although it's super strange. Like you're up on stage and people are honking at you like to applaud, which is it's an experience. But at the same time, it has provided for folks that can access a vehicle and can partake in these kinds of events. It has been kind of the beacon of hope of, wow, people really do want to see this content, and people do want to gather together in this way to have that communal experience. We just have to make safety of the paramount concern, and so that was our way to kind of hack it. And Of course, we tried to make it as fully extra as possible, like put, as many safe distance performances, up on stage as possible, and find ways to, engage people throughout the space, and try to, give some of those elements that we're craving through that shared connection. But other than that, it's tough. And I mean, I live in Toronto, y'all are in New York. Like, weather-wise, the challenge is yet to come. Being able to get outside saved me this summer. Being able to see someone in a park, was really so important. And I think the winter is going to present a lot of new challenges in any of those kind of in-person engagements.
Yeah. Glennda, you mentioned that demand for mental health services was up with the center. Can you talk more about what particularly you've seen rise and how you've all dealt with it?
Sure. I would say it's been sort of across the board in terms of the work that we do, and we do one-on-one counseling for short-term mental health issues. So people who are really struggling with isolation, depression, anxiety. We run an outpatient substance abuse treatment clinic and do a variety of programs and services around substance use disorder, both for young people and for adults. And the pandemic has been very challenging for folks who struggle with overwhelming feelings and issues of addiction. And so we have just seen all of the groups that we're running, whether it be a basic support group. And we did launch in the beginning of the pandemic, like a general, hey, let's get together and just talk to each other group. We launched a meditation group to try and help people just, be calm and centered. We have been able to, because of the skills on our staff, launch a number of groups in Spanish as well as in English. So that's been really amazing for people to be able to take advantage of. We always have groups for folks that are navigating gender identity and various transitions. And that's really critical. I mean, when we look at the LGBT community broadly, and we look at both the pandemic, but also the political climate that people are navigating, it is particularly hard for people of color in our community right now, and always has been for trans folks in our community right now, and always has been for LGBT immigrants who also, if you really, like, if you did a Venn diagram of who's being targeted by the current political leadership in our country and by the pandemic, there's a lot of overlap. And so we really have tried, like, we launched a group for Latinx men during the pandemic to connect with each other, just trying to think of these segments of our community and what we can provide and how we can be a resource for people to find each other and build that community and get that support that they need. We have a front desk, our information and referral specialists staff the front desk when we are open from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. And they answer all kinds of questions in person, on the phone, over email. And we were able to, through a partnership with Salesforce, launch a chat feature on our website. So people could be available to answer questions and help connect members of our community to resources throughout the pandemic. And that has been really beneficial. We also, just to echo something that Eric said, we have a youth program for about 1,000 LGBTQ young people in the city. And we found pretty quickly in the pandemic that a lot of young people found themselves in situations that were not necessarily accepting of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And so we had to get creative about how we could connect with young people, because they didn't want to be seen as like, I'm on a gay phone call, or I'm on this, trans web Zoom thing. And so we worked through some video games that our young people were playing online that have a chat feature. So outwardly, that young person is like playing a video game with their friends, but in reality, they're also like chatting, whatever they're feeling. I'm so lonely. Here's what's going on with me. And we also, the last thing I would say is we do a camp every year. We've done it for years, where we bring about 60, 70 young people together to the YMCA camp in New Jersey. And it's like a week-long overnight activities of amazingness. And young people look forward to it all year. Happens in August. Obviously, we didn't do it in person this year, but we had about 30 young people who did it virtually. And the benefit of doing it virtually was that we ended up gathering a lot of family members and a lot of friends who also were able to like attend the camp because it was virtual. So someone's little brother would be like, "What are you doing?" And then it would become like, "Oh, the brother," and then the dad, and then everybody's like participating in this virtual camp. So that was kind of heartwarming, silver lining in a challenging situation.
Yeah. Oh, the video games, this therapy idea. It's already therapeutic, but having that social component, I hadn't thought about that. Then Eric, how is the DOE? What are you seeing about kids and mental health right now?
Yeah, so we definitely have a huge and urgent need for more counselors in schools and more guidance support. Just facing this uncertain future for the DOE, as far as like there's a big teacher shortage, there's a staff shortage all around. So we have been a lot of people who work in central offices who have positions such as mine, depending on what your credentials, they're being placed in schools, and a lot of them haven't taught in years. They've been behind a desk. So it's a unique situation, not just for the students, but for staff as well. So we've been putting in place more counselors and more support. Luckily, at the last minute, we were able to there was talks about a huge budget cut for counselors, and we were able to maintain and still hire more counselors. So that's a big priority for the DOE now, is to provide schools with the support that they need for students, and also for staff, because like I said, there's staff now are taking on roles that they never thought that they would. It was on the list, the short list of people who might be deployed to schools, and I was not excited about that. As much as I love students, I did not want to teach English. I did that. I did my time, and I happily got out. So, but there are a lot of teachers who, a lot of people who didn't have the choice. So now they're in schools, and they're because of their union contracts. So we're providing support, mental resources for them as well, and counseling services for those people as well. But it's really been difficult for students. So and getting not only just having that support available, but making sure that the students know that it's there and that they're using it is a feat that we're in the midst of right now. Our office, specifically, I work in the LGBTQ office. It's an office of myself, and we brought on a family support manager who's a social worker. And so luckily I have this person with me alongside, and she works with families of mostly trans students, but really all students. But a lot of the referrals come from my inbox. So it's a lot of trans students, and she works with them, providing them mental health support as well as resources to get them more comfortable, to get them talking about different things, talking about how they may be uncomfortable about certain topics. So we're trying, but we still have a huge need for more, and we're seeing it more and more that students need this. So hopefully we get some more money in our budget in the coming months and years, because it's not going to be a short-term thing. We're going to see lasting effects of COVID for a long time. So I definitely need to schmooze a little bit more and try to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. I'm curious also about what's going on with, is there more bullying? Is there less bullying? What's going on with bullying LGBT kids?
That's a great question. Bullying, it's consistent bullying. And it's, I just want to say, I'll speak candidly, it's being underreported now because the way to report it is like, it's not, you're not seeing that your favorite teacher in person. They're not having those interactions. So I think bullying is definitely being something that's being underreported significantly across the board, across all ages. But but there's still bullying that is being reported virtually, and the virtual bullying still happens. There are Zoom bombs. As much as secure as we try to make learning situations, we're still having those instances. So we're trying to put more security in place, but doing that also kind of alienates some students as well. So it's hard, but I would definitely, bullying is still a consistent issue, especially for our LGBTQ kids. But yeah,
do
a better job at that.
I want to ask you all what you think, how you think COVID's long-term effects will be felt in the community and in your organizations. Start with you, Andria. What do you think is going to happen in your world once this is all over?
Well, I am not in any way being flippant here, but we're going to see a lot of films made that are set in one home with two cast and their own pets.
We want
for
that,
sure.
Though.
I mean, I maybe there's great innovation, out of those simple constraints, right? We'll see. But I wake up every day with being, reinvigorated by the innovation and the brilliance of queer people. I truly think that there will be some things that we haven't thought of yet, or they haven't made it to a more mainstream space yet, in terms of the way that folks are finding ways to exist and connect and create community. Just being here in Toronto, walking through, our village, the business owners, the bar owners, lobbying the city to get the street closure so they could, have socially distant setups in the street. And with like I said, with the outdoor screenings, more investment in infrastructures for safe outdoor events in the future, I think, we'll see a lot of that. So, there's going to be a need for continued invention and reinvention, which, we're no strangers to, for sure.
Totally. What do you think the long term effects are going to be for you, Glennda?
On the plus side, I think this has really pushed us to examine our boundaries and really push beyond them. Before this happened, we would have said, oh no, you can't, it's not going to be possible, or it's not going to be popular to do something digital or online. That's just not the same. It's sort of, substandard in some way. And I think this has really shown us that necessity is the mother of invention, and people are really hungry for ways to connect. And since we can't connect in the same way in person, we have seen really high engagement in and demand for those virtual connections. And so that's something I can see us continuing as part of our offerings. It really does. It enables us, the conversation before the pandemic was like, how do we make sure we're getting to the outer boroughs? And we do advocacy work. And so it's like, do we make sure we're getting across the state, not just in the city? And now online, it's really easy to draw all of those people together and not have to worry as much about those barriers. I do think that in terms of mental health, making sure that we know as a country, we don't provide enough support to people around this issue. And we know that that's particularly pointed for our community and specific segments of our community. And I think that will continue. And so it's on us, amazing queer and trans folks, to figure out how to support each other and how to really make sure that we deal with any of the lingering effects of this pandemic, even after it's gone. And I do think those lingering effects will be isolation, mental health, relationships, like we're going to have to rebuild a bit. And so I have the utmost confidence in us, but it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. What do you think, Eric?
I agree. I think it's good. We have an uphill battle to face, but there are some positives. We have been forced to do things that we had on the plan for 5 years from now, as far as thinking about how to be accessible in a virtual way. So we had to really quickly adapt. So there's some positive things that have come out of this quarantine and this pandemic. I know I personally was begging to work from home for years, and then now I have the opportunity and I actually hate it. So I went into the office the other day, which I didn't have to, but I just needed to get out. And I was just like, there are other people in the office, and I was making these awkward jokes because I haven't been around them for so long. And I'm like, oh, it's gonna take a while for me to be comfortable around people again and not be weird in quarantine, Eric, because I've been talking to only one person for the last 7 months. Mm-hmm. So I think we're gonna see that with students and with teachers, and it's gonna be a while before we get out that awkward phase, but it's gonna happen. And I'm happy for the time that we got to take and to recenter and regroup and look at some of the things that were broken within our system to address. So it's given us some things to fix really quickly, as far as how we support LGBTQ students. And so it hasn't been all bad.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, that we're gonna have to relearn how to do small talk.
Hard. It's hard.
I think that's the time we have today. Here's David.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you all so much. Such an inspiring conversation. As I mentioned at the top, each of you have been such an incredible partner to NewFest. At the center, we have our monthly screening series, NewFest at the Center Presents, which we've been doing virtually since the pandemic and have been so grateful to continue that relationship. As Eric mentioned, we have such an incredible relationship with the Department of Education and are so excited about the screenings that we're doing for students as part of the festival. So please find Eric or contact NewFest if you have students who would like to participate in those. And Andria has been a wonderful leader of Inside Out and a real inspiration in terms of how to support the community. So really grateful for the work that all of you do. And thank you, Spencer, for moderating such a fruitful conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you all. It was an honor.
I did just want to mention a few opportunities for the queer community to gather as part of NewFest. On Friday evening, we are having a My Girl Friday virtual dance party in partnership with House of Yes. So please visit newfest.org to RSVP for that. There are also a couple of drive-ins, as Andria mentioned. That's an opportunity to come honk your horn and be in community with people, even through tin and glass. We are showing a sneak preview of Uncle Frank at the Queens Drive-In on Friday, and on Saturday in Brooklyn, we're showing the film Cicada. So please visit newfest.org to see how you can be a part of the community and connect either virtually or in person. Thank you so much for joining us, and take good care of yourself.